All right. Good evening, my friends. It's wonderful to see all of you, those who are here with us in person, and those, again, we have a lot of good representation from Stanford, Washington Heights, Allentown. I guess Oliver, I forget where we are these days, if it's somewhere else in the Connecticut, Norwalk area, maybe. Okay. And then, of course, right here in Allentown as well. So all Arba Confos are, it's all four corners of the world, right? You can see how much I still have that New York mentality, right? New York state of mind, I think, as I think Billy Joel. Was that Billy Joel? Okay, see, he sung more than just the Allentown song. That's the only thing I ever hear about him when I come. He had some other good songs as well.
I used to go to my nephew lived in Louisville. He was from Chofetz Chaim, and every time we would go visit them, he would be playing on his radio. The Allentown song. I'd block walking us to his house.
I tell everyone, I said if I got a dime for every time someone made that reference to me, I wouldn't need to take a paycheck. It'd be great. Jordan would be very happy to hear that.
He actually made a very defined apology.
He did. He came to sit.
Yeah, to Allentown.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he said this was not about Allentown, but he said he couldn't rhyme anything.
It wasn't because he said something about about steel.
We're best.
Yeah. It's on. I saw it's on the shul website. There's a footnote. There's a footnote on the shul website that talks about that, and then it links to YouTube video. Whoever made the website, the correction over there in the About Allentown, you may have heard the Billy Joel song. Here's the link, and by the way, it's about Bethlehem. But if you guys take a look, if you haven't looked at the shul website in the past 2 weeks, go take a look at it now. There's some updates I put on there. There's some more pictures. For one, there's a youth page now on there, which there wasn't until now. So there's a. What was that?
The program yesterday.
Oh, thank you. Well, Marissa and Carmit from afar was helping as well. So we're very grateful for that. It was beautiful, Baruch Hashem. I went to the JFS to bring this stuff, and they told me to ring the bell. No one answered, so I left it there, and hopefully they don't think that someone put a bomb there or something. And if any of your friends at JFS, you can just let them know that there's a packing box there that has all those vases that we made.
What time?
I brought over like 3:15, 3:20 or something, but I called. All right. I rang the doorbell in the front, then I rang in the back, then I knocked on the back.
What's box labeled?
I think it said Tisha B'Av, but it says it in Hebrew. So hopefully they can read the.
It doesn't look like a terrorist thing. That's what
it's a packing box that we have. It says I forget what the mover company that we use.
Oh, piece of cake.
Piece of cake. Yeah, it says piece of cake on there. So I mean, okay. Anyway, my friends,
it was cake.
To our feature presentation for this evening. So yesterday we spent a lot of time mourning, thinking about how Mashiach has not come. And I thought, what better topic to talk about than Mashiach? Now, when I talk about the Messiah, about Mashiach, which rabbi of recent years do you associate Mashiach with? There are a lot.
The Rebbe.
Yeah, you think about Lubavitcher. Very good, Tova. Yes, and our friends here, right? Lubavitcher Rebbe, right? So, but Moshe Feinstein, and certainly those in the more Lithuanian yeshiva world, are generally not those you would consider messianic. Certainly, if they're not from the Zionist element of the more, well, I don't know if I would call it official world. So what was very surprising to me is that I found many examples. And when I came here for my interview Shabbos, I shared a truncated version of this because it was a Kiddush Dvar Torah. If for some reason you remember that, then there's still more material you're going to get right now. So you're not wasting your time. So what really interested me and piqued my interest was that Rav Moshe seems to talk a lot about Mashiach throughout his literature, but not just in a philosophical way. You see, when we think about Mashiach, maybe we think about everyone like kind of singing Kumbaya circles, sing Ani Mamin, and Mashiach will come one day. But what if I told you that believing in Mashiach, and not just believing that it can come, but that it will come imminently, is actually a halachic concept? And you'll see what I mean momentarily. Take a look at the first source for those who want to follow along. This is Os Aleph. And just again, in terms of the methodology, is that I tend to bold sections, and I tend to just read the sections that I bolded. Otherwise, we would be here for like 2 extra hours going through word for word. So we're just popping from bold section to bold section. But actually before that, if you look at the header of the tshuva is Biur Hachiyav Litzafos Levias HaMashiach B'chol Yom. He's clarifying the obligation to anticipate Mashiach every single day. And this is addressed to Rabbi Yechiel Michel Feinstein, so we have a member of the family, and it's actually dated to the month of Nisan. Now, this is important because in Nisan, of course, we have the holiday of Pesach. And in Pesach, so he opens up by saying, Nekayim got mitzvah Pesach, that God willing will be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Pesach. And then it's a very nice transition. He says, as Malachi, as the prophet tells us, Asher Pisam Yavo El Heichalo, Adon Asher Temevakshim, that suddenly we'll be able to come to God's holy precincts. And he says, if one looks back at all of the medieval philosophers, all their calculations of when the Messiah would arrive, pretty much all of them have passed at this point. Not such a great thing to hear. It's like maybe some people argue we're already in the Messianic era. This is the debate over the prayer that we make for the state of Israel on Shabbos morning. So it says, Reishis Michas Gulasenu, the beginning of the flowering of our redemption. So some people, myself included, add the word Shetehei. It should be the flowering of the redemption. Because, so some people believe we're already essentially in a Messianic era. I think that thinking is a little bit dangerous because if we recall, Rabbi Akiva kind of thought that Bar Kokhba was going to be the Messiah, and things did not work out really well. We know we had Shabtai Tzvi. That didn't work out too well either. Now, I think we're on a little bit firmer footing over here of what's going on today. But, I think the same way we are academic about things and skeptical about other things in halacha. And that's what always interested me. In modern Orthodoxy, we tend to be very skeptical of following the Gedolim, right? In the Haredi world, they're much more into what the rabbi says I follow. In the modern Orthodox world, we take a little bit of healthy academic skepticism. So I think that healthy academic skepticism should be applied to other matters of religion and theology as well. Anyway, I digress, my friends. All these calculations have passed. Any moment now could be Mashiach. Tomorrow is no better than the day before, which might sound a little bit daunting, but also means tomorrow has the potential to be Mashiach. That it can come at any single moment. It's not sufficient just to believe that Mashiach might come, but I actually have to believe that it will arrive imminently. Where does he get this from, you might ask? So the next source is a Gemara in Menachos, though shout out to some of the Stanford people listening in. I think it came up in Sukkah as well, if I'm not mistaken. The Gemara is talking about something called Yashan and Chadash. So now maybe we've seen the word Yashan in the past, because if you get like one of these like very frum Danishes, it'll say that it's Kemach Yashan on there. Now, what does Yashan mean? What it means is, so that thing we do called Svir Sa'omer after Pesach? So we're like, hey, you ever think for a second like, wait, what's an Omer? It's not just a time where we can't listen to music. Before those restrictions came in, the idea was that we were not allowed to eat from the new grains called Chadash until the Omer offering was brought at the end of the first day of Pesach. Once that offering, the carbon Omer, was brought, we would be allowed to partake in all the new grains because now they would be rendered Yashan, older grain. So here's the thing, though. The Gemara tells us, Mishachar Beis HaMikdash, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Hiskin Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai she Yom Hanef Kulo Aser. Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai said that entire day following Pesach, it is forbidden for one to eat from the new grains. One needs to wait till the day afterwards. My taima, what's the concern here? Mehera Yibane Beis HaMikdash. Maybe the Beis HaMikdash will suddenly be rebuilt, and we'll say, wait, last year, weren't we able to eat immediately when the sun came up because it wasn't contingent on an Omer offering being brought? So we're going to think next year when the Beis HaMikdash comes, I don't need to wait till the Omer offering is going to be brought. I can eat from the moment the sun comes up. And so therefore, we're just going to rabbinically prohibit the entire day after this whole second day of Pesach, and one cannot eat the new grains until the day following that. Why is this all important? Well, one, it's important to know about Chadash Yashan, even if we're not keeping it, myself included. It's good to be aware of it. But what's the kicker here? The Gemara introduced a rabbinic halachic stricture on the basis of Mehera Yibana Beis HaMikdash, that maybe the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt. What does this mean? Rav Moshe Feinstein says. Look at the next source in the bold. It was only a maybe that Mashiach would come, that the Beis Hamikdash would be rebuilt. And only a small possibility. Then why would we introduce a whole rabbinic stricture on a maybe, on a small possibility? Ella, umishum da'achia b'chol yom v'yom letzapos ke'ein vadai sheyavo hayom. Rather, it's because we're obligated to believe that Mashiach can come at any moment, ke'ein vadai, essentially with near certitude that Mashiach will arrive. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily that we have to be naive, I should say. I don't think he's saying we have to be naive that Mashiach is going to all of a sudden arrive. If one is living that way constantly, then you're constantly setting yourself up for disappointment. But I think what he means is that halacha wants us to conduct ourselves in an anticipatory manner, that we should be acting and conducting ourselves, even in halacha, we have the expectation that Mashiach can really come at a moment's notice. And that's his assertion in this tshuva over here. Yes, Marcia.
Isn't there another suggestion that you should live as this is your last day of your life?
Very good. Oh, we're gonna get to that point. Okay, I'm so glad, Marcia. You were like 3 steps ahead of me. Very good. No, excellent. So, all right, Marcia's saying, isn't there an idea we have to live like it's our last day on earth? Excellent. And this is going to be a counterpoint to Rav Moshe. We'll see, hopefully, within the next 10 minutes or so. But if I don't get to it, hold me to it. Okay. Excellent, Marcia. Okay. Now we'll gloss over a source Dalet over here, but suffice to say that there are questions about whether one should be davening for the Messiah to quickly arrive. But Rav Moshe says nowadays, when all the calculations have basically passed, it's certainly fair game to be davening for Mashiach to come. That's what he says in source number Dalet. All right, now look at page 2. This is a small one, Oshe. And remember, I told you about the Rav Moshe Feinstein cinematic universe, which is not cinematic, but it sounds cool because it sounds like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which means that, again, I preface that most rabbis, when they teach Igros Moshe, they're just looking at the Igros Moshe. And maybe they'll look at some, like what someone said who disagrees with Rav Moshe Feinstein. But what I like to do in these shiurim is to point out secondary sources that enhance our understanding that are not found in his own writings. So the next book we're looking at is called Zikenecha Yomrulach, which is written by Rabbi Chaim Mintz, who is, I think, still serving as the Mashgiach Ruchani, the spiritual advisor of the Yeshiva of Staten Island, which is important in the Feinstein orbit because Rabbi Reuven Feinstein Shlita, Rav Moshe Feinstein's currently only living son, is the Rosh Yeshiva of that institution. So there's a lot of, Rav Moshe would go there all the time to give shiur. So Rabbi Chaim Mintz has a book called Zikenecha Yomrulach. It's essentially a book about reflections on his interactions with major rabbinic luminaries. And in there, Rav Moshe Feinstein occupies a very prominent position. So in there he says, Shamati Shadas Maran Zatzal. I heard that Rav Moshe Feinstein's opinion was that we do not have to train children to fast except for Yom Kippur. Why? So Yom Kippur, there's other obligations, but the other fast days, there's no need to train a child to fast. Why? Ki b'mehera yavo hagoel, because we expect that we won't have to fast very soon because Mashiach will soon arrive. That's example number 2 in Rav Moshe Feinstein's writings, where he paskin the halacha based on anticipating the coming of Mashiach. That's example number 2. Yeah.
When Mashiach comes, we won't have Yom Kippur. I thought we only have Purim.
Yeah, well, there's a question about all the holidays, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, like part, like, and we'll only have Megillas Esther. You know, this is the thing that all the people are pushing, like, to learn Nach. You know, a lot of the Sifrei Nevi'im and Ksuvim might be rendered inoperative at that point. But we're told that Megillas Esther stays with us forever. So if you like Megillas Esther, don't worry.
So
we're holding on to that.
So the child is fast is.
Yeah.
Learn to fast because of Yom Kippur when the.
I think there's other considerations for Yom Kippur. I'm forgetting exactly. I think there's alternative considerations of why to fast specifically for Yom Kippur, but certainly not for the other fast days in that respect. Now, and also the question is in Olam Haba, do we have our bodies or do we are only spirits? We'll talk about that in a moment. We'll get into the theology soon. Let's give a few more examples of this. In Os Vav, a little bit of preface. I remember back in my Connecticut days, there was one time there was a funeral that was taking place. The shul owns a number of cemeteries. There's one really obscure one. Maybe the Stanford folks remember this. It's in Darien, but it's not the Darien. Darien was a town right next to Stanford, and basically I think Jews weren't allowed in there until very recently. So there's a cemetery by train tracks over there. But then there's another cemetery I only went to once, which is basically this very beautiful, very what's the right word? Idyllic. Thank you. Idyllic suburban gated neighborhood in which all the houses look the same and everything's like, it's like the what's that like that song like Little House?
Yeah.
What was that?
Tacky.
Yeah, that one exactly. It's like that song basically. So there. It may have been. So there's a where's Jordan when I need? No, actually, Jordan. I have to excuse him. Jordan heard the shir yesterday on the Zoom, so I told him that he's excused. He gets excused from the shir. But anyway, so there's this very small plot of land that I think was there before that gated community came up. So as a legacy, it stays there with graves, and it's like right behind someone's driveway in the most obscure place. Anyway, we get there. And the funeral, oh my gosh, I still remember this day. There were literally 3 funerals that day. This is why the shul needed an assistant rabbi, and that's why it was needed. Because there was a funeral that was there. There was a funeral in Westchester, and then there was a funeral off the Jackie Robinson in Brooklyn. So me and the senior rabbi were at this funeral. Then the senior rabbi Rabbi Cohen went to the Westchester one, and then I went to the one off the Jackie Robinson in Brooklyn. It was I got to stop in Kew Garden Hills on my way back and get myself a lafa and see my brother from Mincha, so it wasn't that bad. But yeah, sending me to Jackie Robinson during rush hour was not fun. But it is what it is. I remember that. I think that may have been the busiest day outside of even more so than Yom Kippur in my probably whole career. Yeah, that was quite a day. Anyway, what happened was that we get there to the funeral number 1. And there is a hole dug in the plot, and then what happens is the guy, one of the Avel and one of the mourners, is looking around and saying, "Wait a minute!" Looks at a map. This is the wrong plot. Our family plot's over there, and so like the whole hullabaloo, and they're gonna make so they had to redo. Thankfully for me, I came just to help make the minyan there. The senior rabbi was conducting the funeral there. So I said, "Is it all right if I go? I have to kind of go to Brooklyn soon also." It's like, "Yeah, you can go at this point." But this case was post facto. They already did the funeral, and then the family comes and says, "Wait a minute, why do you bury this person in our family plot?" And they come to Moshe Weinstein and say, "What, we want the body exhumed." And he says, "You know what? You're right. It's your family kever. You're right. We can actually move the remains to a new burial plot, but with an important caveat." He says, "Bahosif Rabin," it's the end of source number 6, Osvav. Rabin me'olam lo yat sheyimaru lahasar nikvar bekever gazel. He said you shouldn't rush to do it. Why? Can anyone guess? Te'ula yavo Mashiach. Because maybe Mashiach is going to come, and there won't be a need to reposition everybody. So stock number 3 made by Ramosha based on consideration of maybe Mashiach will come imminently. Let's see what else I could give you. I got more stuff. Os Zion. Somebody asked Ramosha for a bracha to live a may have Esrim Shana until 120 years old. Ramosha responds, "No. Yesh kanira anashim shechoshim shel shayach yosem yizad." Are people think you can't live more than 120 years old? Lo margishim shebias Mashiach yerach chayim. Do they not know that during the Messianic era we will live? So why are you limiting the bracha to 120 years old? If one can live past that, there's all these interesting questions about, the way healthcare is going. I mean, it's going to be very interesting. I don't remember this. I wasn't alive when this happened, when man first stepped on the moon. But I remember there's all these theologians and Rabbanim were saying, no, the heavens is God's domain. The man is only supposed to be here on earth. And then all of a sudden, once man got to the moon, all these theologians and the rabbis and everyone had to start revising their theology based on that. So, we're going to start figuring things out on May of Esrim Shana. Whoever said 120 has to be the cutoff point. Anyway, So that's another. Okay, that's not really a halachic consideration, but I thought it was cute, so I added that in. Here's a halachic one. So not as you don't see this as frequently, but you'll see it. I have actually, ironically, I've only been to the KI cemetery because the only funeral I've had to do so far was in the KI cemetery for someone who was out of town, but they had a family plot over there. So I haven't actually been to our cemetery yet. Hopefully, I won't need to be there for a long time, God willing. But perhaps there's some double headstones that are there. What will happen is after a spouse passes away, what they decide sometimes to do is to erect a double headstone so that eventually when they join their spouse, they're buried next to each other. So the question is, halachically, is there any consideration? And I should preface by saying what I'm sharing here is for academic purposes. I'm not here to give up stock on the double headstones. I think there's really, we have bigger fish to fry than that. If people do it, it's all, go for it. But Rav Moshe Feinstein was opposed to it. Rav Moshe Feinstein was also opposed to going to the movies. So I'm just saying, like everything I share with Moshe Feinstein, like you can ask me what my actual opinion on it is afterwards. But again, I just say I'm not one to disagree with Rav Moshe Feinstein, but there might be other poskim to rely on. So he says, Ki hu ke'ein kefira chas v'shalom bevias hamashiach shemekavim anu b'chol yom sheyavo ikatzenu l'Eretz Yisrael. It's like a denial that the Messiah is going to come and bring us to Eretz Yisrael by me planting my and arguably this can be me not just for a double headstone, but even just for some reason someone's very ambitious and decides to put up a headstone ahead of time for themselves. So it's like one is essentially throwing in the towel and saying, I don't expect Mashiach to come during my lifetime, and I expect to be buried here, and that's it. And I'll take your question in a moment, Toby. I'm just going to finish the line. I think right. You have a question there? Okay, good. I'll take it in just a moment. That's on the Zoom. He says, even according to, I think he's referring to the Rambam over here, that we will die again after Mashiach and then become ascend into spirit forms. Even according to them, during the Messianic era, at least we will die in Eretz Yisrael. We wouldn't die here in the diaspora, Chutz La'aretz. So to put up the double headstone, or arguably any headstone, just most people, they don't put a plain single headstone ahead of time, but it's the same logic. That is like a denial that I expect Mashiach to arrive imminently, at least during my lifetime, and bring us to Eretz Yisrael. So that's Psak, if I'm keeping score, I think number 4, based on this consideration. All right. By the way, I should introduce you. Over here, the person asking the question is Toby Schaefer, past president of our shul in Stanford, and was the previous head of adult ed. So just you can all say hi to her. She's always been a fan, and we have a number of Stanford people on. I see Marina Sapir is on, George Klein is on. Did I introduce anyone on here? Oliver is on from our past shiurim. I think my father-in-law is Larry over there, and Dave is in our community, as you know, and there's Joe. Okay. And there might be other people, but I can't see you, so I apologize if I'm missing anyone. All right, Toby, your question.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm a very big fan of Rabbi Kurtz. But my question is, what about just buying burial plots? Because people generally buy them, sometimes 20, years, and you get married and you buy a burial plot. Did the Rabbi Feinstein have anything to say about that?
Yeah, very good, Toby. And you know what? And this gets us back to Marcia's question as well. I'm gonna address Marcia's question. I'm gonna address your question in one fell swoop. Watch this. 2 for the price of 1. Look at Osiyot over here. The Sefer Shari Tzedek. I don't know who the Sefer Shari Tzedek is. I don't think it has anything to do with the hospital as far as I know. But I know it's cited in a book called the Psichas Igros, which is another book in the Rav Moshe Feinstein cinematic universe, which collects all those who agreed and disagreed with Rav Moshe. He gets essentially like 99.9% of everything. He did a really thorough job. Rabbi Yonason Roseman, I spoke with him on the phone, huge Talmud Chacham. So he cites this book, which says, wait a minute, not only can I argue that it might be permissible to set up a headstone ahead of time, but I can argue based on a Mishnah in Avos that says, Marcia, v'shuv yom echad lifnei misascha, that every single day we're supposed to do teshuvah, to repent, lest it be our last day here on earth. So one can make the argument not just that it's permissible, but maybe it's commendable for me to set up the funeral, the burial plot ahead of time, like Toby, like you suggested. And in fact, there's Bali Musar, there's certain rabbis who wanted to instill this idea and internalize it, that they would have already their coffin made for themselves. And every now and then they would go lie in the coffin so that they would think about the Yom HaMisa, so that they could prioritize their life accordingly. It's not something that I advise for the average person or for myself either, but just to give you an idea of how far people took it. So Moshe is arguing that here it's like a denial that Mashiach will come, but one could argue that there's another Jewish value at play, that one should be thinking about the idea that our time here on earth is temporal, and that ultimately we go to this place, we go back to the earth, and eventually our souls are returned to God. So one could actually not just defend the practice, but one could actually argue that it's the right practice. And in fact, if you go back to O's test, the source beforehand, Rav Hershel Schechter, your good friend Toby, just in your honor, Hershel Schechter in Mipnei Harav reports that Rabbi Yosef B. Soloveitchik, his burial plot was a double headstone as well. His wife predeceased him, I believe, by 25 years, he says, and there's a double headstone over there. And so, from the fact that Soloveitchik seemed okay with it, clearly he was not bothered by Rav Moshe Feinstein's consideration. And when I gave the shiur yesterday on Torah and motion, Rabbi Jay Kelman told me, based on his trips to Europe and Prague, I think, he saw that there were already a number of double headstones that rabbis there had. So this is a practice going back some time already with a good basis. Okay, so that's good. I got your point, Toby. I got your point. I see, Dave. Would it be a reliance on a miracle? You want to unmute and just tell us more about the idea? Yes.
Hi, because I've understood a general principle that we don't rely on a miracle when we're making practical decisions. We rely on continuing on its course, and we do our hishtadlut, we do our effort as though nature will continue on its course. God does the miracle, that's on him. And
right.
Very so lucky when he does.
Very good point, Dave. So what you're invoking is the principle in somchen al hanes. Generally, we do not rely on miracles. In other words, I cannot walk in front of a 16-wheeler truck and expect that God is all of a sudden going to rescue me at that moment. That's suicidal. However, I think what you're pointing out is what makes Rav Moshe Feinstein's position so remarkable, is that he seems to be factoring in a supernatural event into the halachic calculus. Now, I could argue this is different. God did not, nowhere does it say in the Torah that God promised that he would save Moshe Kurtz from going in front of a 16-wheeler truck, but we are promised that Mashiach will come. So I think it's a little bit different in that respect. But I think, again, what you're saying here sharpens Rav Moshe Feinstein's point. Why I think this is so remarkable, that he is paskening halacha with the consideration of Mashiach arriving imminently as a factor in his legal analysis. That to me is remarkable. And this is what I just find is interesting in general, when those who are considered the Jewish legal scholars are forced to reckon with theology because the halacha demands that of them. I'll give you a fun case where this comes up. So the Medrash says that at Har Sinai and Mount Sinai, when we accepted the Torah, momentarily, when God spoke, our souls departed our body, and when God stopped speaking, they returned to our body. So I got a good question for you. It's not my question. The commentaries asked this, right, Marsha? What's the question?
You're still married.
Exactly. Very good. So Marsha and the commentators say, wait a minute. If everyone died and was just, essentially regained their life and were reborn, essentially, wouldn't that mean that like everyone's like not married at that point anymore, back to their spouses? And what does this mean for the Suin and all these Mamzeris and all these different kinds of laws?
Not a Jewish vow until death do us part.
I mean, well, here's the thing. It says there's only two ways to end a marriage, right? Either there's a divorce, or the spouse or the man dies, or spouse dies. It's yeah. I mean, this is there's I forget what I heard this right. Well, the reason I bring this up, there's I think it was insert your favorite gadol here. I think it was Rav Akiva Eger. That basically there was a man who was did not want to issue a divorce. It was either a man or the woman was refusing to accept a divorce. So insert whichever one, because post Rabbeinu Gershom, you can't force a divorce either way. So they go over to the spouse who was denying the divorce, and he reads the first Mishnah in Gittin, which basically the Mishnah in Gittin says that, either there are two ways to end the marriage, either through a get or through Misa Sabal or through the death of the spouse. So you got a choice, and the person shoos him away. And then the story goes that the person dropped dead apparently the next day. I don't know, again, I don't know whether it's true or not, but when we're mentioning this point, it made me think of that story.
I know someone in the shul.
Oh, it happened. Oh, wow. Oh, it's a real story. Okay.
Where the man wouldn't give the woman a divorce and was making all sorts of financial blackmail and everything. And the girl's father went to him and says, there's another way she can get rid of you. It really meant it. And they got the divorce.
Oh, okay. Well, glad they didn't have to go to option B. All right. There you go.
Send people out to.
Yeah, right. That's
That's been into paying up.
that's I think there was a sting operation one time that was done with some people who tried doing that, and the police got them. Anyway, like I used to say back in Stanford, consult your local Orthodox senior rabbi. That's what now I can't say that anymore. That was my tagline back in Stanford. I would just drop a really controversial halacha or something and say, that's just me, consult your local Orthodox senior rabbi. So no, yeah, that's it. I already issued my first legislation at Minion already about the Tehillim policy. So that's I already got enough people angry at me. So I'm not issuing more legislation until next month. All right, I say it has to be at least a month break between each and every legislation that comes out. I don't believe in flooding the zone. Okay, we're gonna end it over there. Anyway, my friends, onto Osiyat Aleph. So Rabbi Yehuda Herzl-Hagen also disagrees with Moshe. I'll just share a few points over here to keep in mind. One thing that's interesting is that apparently Rashi, Ramban, or Rambam, do I need I say more? Three of the most famous medieval Jewish scholars. Right? Ramban from our Shudas Torah, Rambam, Maimonides, Rashi, right? Okay, we've heard these hopefully. If not, it was worth coming tonight just to hear them. So they each respectively calculated when Mashiach would come. So here's the thing. If you calculate when Mashiach is going to arrive, you are essentially saying implicitly that there are times that we don't really expect Mashiach to be arriving. So if they are calculating that, so here comes Rav Moshe Feinstein saying Mashiach could come at any single moment, but they apparently thought not. So now I'll defend Rav Moshe Feinstein over here, because I think Rav Moshe's point was all the calculations certainly by now at least have passed. So certainly now it's more fair game. So I mean, again, he's basing on a Gemara, which is before medieval times, but I thought I'd defend him a little bit.
Yeah, but don't they always say don't try to calculate it?
Right. Well, it depends who you follow on that matter. But apparently there were Rishonim who were dealing with it. Now, whether they were doing it because they really believed it or because they need to keep the faith, it's not clear to me. But anyway, one other point is that there are instances in halacha. Who's to say the reason that they prohibited the chadash for another day, the new grain for another day, is because the Beis Hamikdash is certainly going to be rebuilt, or we're worried it will certainly be rebuilt. Who's to say that means we are certain the Beis Hamikdash is going to be rebuilt? Maybe it is an astronomical chance, but you know what? There are other instances in halacha in which we are concerned for astronomical chances occurring, and I'll give you one. It's everybody's favorite, Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galios, second day of Yontif, that we have to keep here in the diaspora. I think, if I remember when I was still a smicha student, and I was, I go around sometimes on Torah tours or somewhere, and they say, "Oh, you're in smicha becoming a rabbi. Can you figure out how to get rid of second day of Yom Tov? You'd be our Messiah if you figured out how to do it." I'm just saying, there's people who know a lot more than me who couldn't figure out how to do away with it. So I can't get your expectations up. But why do we still keep it? Shema Tigzor Malchus Gezera Va'asila Kalkula Sheyishku Soda Ibor. It says in the Gemara in Beitza that we are concerned that there'll be some sort of government. They're going to grab and seize all of our Ezra's Torah Luachs. We won't know when to say Tachana and when not to, when second day Yontif is going to be. We'll lose our calendar. Now that sounds like a very almost far-fetched possibility. We're going to forget everything. See right here that sometimes in halacha, we do take astronomical possibilities into account. So maybe Rebbe Moshe Feinstein's proof from the concern of the Beis HaMikdash being rebuilt is not necessarily the ironclad proof that means that we have to always be concerned that Mashiach is going to arrive imminently at a moment's notice. He has some other arguments against Rebbe Moshe, but we'll leave it at that. I want to get to my favorite part of this year. There's also a piece over here on page 4 where, okay, I'll briefly summarize this. It's worth saying. I'll put it quickly, open parentheses right now. All right, open parentheses, page number 4. Moshe Feinstein, in a completely separate shuva, not related to our topic, says that according to the Rambam, who we know as a rationalist, and right, Lee, a good friend of yours, who didn't like all the supernatural stuff. Right? I know whenever I mention Kabbalah when we do the 5-minute mitzvah, I always see you get excited by that. So Ramosha makes what seemingly a very odd statement, an odd assertion, that even a Rambam concedes that a mezuzah and amulets have powers to protect as names of angels on amulets could provide spiritual protection. Now, this is something that goes seemingly against everything that we know about the Rambam, who was all about minimizing the supernatural. He iconically claimed that the whole entire story, I believe, of Sodom and Amorah and other narratives in Bereshis and other places were all just in a dream, that they never happened. And the way a lot of people find out about these Rambams, myself included, is because the Ramban Nachmanides will cite the controversial Rambams, and then he takes them to task. But he thought everyone was reading the Rambam back then, so then he had to fight against the Rambam. Nowadays, most people aren't reading the Guide for the Perplexed cover to cover, but more people are learning the Ramban al Torah. So you wind up learning about all these controversial Rambams. It reminds me of my Rebbe in 9th grade. So I went to a very yeshivish old boys school. So he said, Rabbi Sai, you shouldn't go to Aviator, to the ice skating rink at the sports complex in Brooklyn called Aviator. You shouldn't go there on Motzei Shabbos because there's boys and girls there. So you shouldn't be going there, Rabbi Sai. So I remember my friend and I, we turned to each other like, I never thought to go to Aviator. That's a great idea. So this is that's kind of like what the Ramban is doing over here. It's like, I didn't know about that controversial Rambam. Thank you very much, Ramban. So that's what it's like learning about those Rambans. So anyway, so based on this, Dr. Mark Shapiro, who wrote an excellent book called The Limits of Orthodox Theology, where he basically, his whole point over there is to point out that the 13 principles of faith that Rambam makes us sign on to, each and every one of them is a little bit iffy. But in a footnote there, he says, although Rabbi Moses Feinstein was the greatest posek of his time, he seems to have had no knowledge of Maimonidean philosophy, which I thought was quite an assertion. Now, I think what would be fair for him to say, if I were to amend it, is that Moshe Feinstein was not an expert in Maimonidean philosophy. But the claim he had to, quote, no knowledge of Maimonidean philosophy, to me is absurd. The Mechilas Kavod Taraso Harama. And how do I know this? Why do I bring this up? Because you glance back at Osches for just a moment, and remember that tshuva about the double headstone? So Rav Moshe there says, he acknowledges that there's an opinion in the Rishonim. Most Rishonim essentially believe that Mashiach comes, the dead will be revived, and we stay that way. Rambam originally, I believe, kind of denied this whole idea of us coming back and being reincarnated in our bodies once more. But then he got a lot of flack for it. So he said, well, the dead will be revived in their body form, but then only to die again. And then we ascend to spirit form, and we remain in spirit form in Olam Haba. But you see, Rav Moshe Feinstein acknowledged Rambam Shita right over here. He didn't say Rambam, but it's very clearly, he's very clearly referring to the Rambam. So that's to say, I think it's quite an assertion that one has to make to say that, a great posting is very well read. Again, even just studying halachic literature, you're going to come by theology as well. So I just wanted to kind of debunk that statement over there. Now, if he revised it and he wrote that he was not an expert in Maimonidean philosophy, that would be acceptable. All right. So again, Dr. Mark Shapiro is a much bigger scholar, knows a lot more than I do, but that line over there, I had to take to task. All right. Final, we did start a few minutes late, so I hope it's okay if I go a few minutes later, if that's all right. I'll try to get things together in 5 minutes. My apologies. Maybe I need a call from 17, 8:15 in the future. I don't know. I'll try to be better, my friends. Ossia Daled. Final stretch. Now, one other work in the Rav Moshe Feinstein Cinematic Universe is called Mad Malchi Rabbanan. This is a Hebrew biography. It's about 32 pages, I believe, but it's packed at the beginning of the 8th volume of Igros Moshe. It is authored by Rabbis Shabtai Rappaport and Mordechai Tendler, grandson-in-law and grandson of Moshe Feinstein, respectively. Rabbi Mordechai Tendler was Rabbi Moshe David Tendler's son, and Rav Shabtai Rappaport was Rabbi Tendler's son-in-law. They collectively edited the final volumes of Igros Moshe. They also edited the Darash Moshe, his drushos, his sermons. And also, they've just been very involved in the editing and production of Moshe Feinstein's works. So they put an important biography at the beginning. In the biography, it talks about how he would wear a torn garment on Tisha B'Av, that he felt it very strongly. It also says that they found him on Pesach, turning to page 5, that, most people, I remember growing up in New York, so if you live in the 5 towns, what are most people, I don't say most people, what are some people doing after Pesach? So they're lining up at the pizza shops. There's a lot of pizza shops. There's a lot of sushi. Pizza shop has sushi in there as well. And everybody is busy clamoring for the first pie of pizza. It's like the Hunger Games. Mamash, the Hunger Games to get the first pie of pizza. Right, Toby? I'm sure you've been involved in that in the past. Right? So Toby over here, who you just introduced you to, she's always finds herself in the 5 towns by her mishpacha over there. So does anyone else have any connection to 5 towns? All right, so it's a good thing, Toby, you're still on. So that way, when I knock the 5 towns, I still have some. Oh, David, you're also a 5 towns connection? Okay.
I have lots of people out there.
Okay, good. So I could, so some people know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Rav Moshe Feinstein was not clamoring for the first pizza after Pesach. They found him sitting alone and despondent. They asked him, "What's wrong?" He said, "Sheshuv avar haPesach u'Mashiach adayin lo ba." Then another year passed by. Another Pesach passed by, and Mashiach did not arrive. That's what he was thinking about at the end of Pesach. Most people, even if you're not clamoring for the pizza, all right, let's turn over the kitchen and everything else. Or this is what he was thinking about. And then I'm sure he also helped out his wife turning over the kitchen again. No, actually, there is I do have another source. When we do a shiur related to family matters, he would help around the house when he had an arrangement basically with his wife. This was under understanding that he would be learning and she would be taking care of the house stuff, very traditional arrangement. But if there was a time where there was a lot of things that need to be done, he would insist on doing the more dirtier chores to demonstrate that all that rest of the time when he was learning and she was doing things around the house, it's not because he thought that she was like the maid or something. So when he was helping around, he insisted that he would do the dirtier tasks to demonstrate that, it was only because they had that kind of relationship that she was helping him learn the Torah, but not because she was like his shipcha, like his maid chas v'shalom. So I have a number of stories that I found throughout these different works that I've been reading about the relationship of him and his wife, and hopefully they'll come out in a future shiur. Okay. There's a number of other sources over here, but we'll gloss over them. One important one in Kol Ram, Yerchasi says that even when Mashiach's going to come, Adayin Yud Tzrichim L'Chachamim Yeshivos. There'll still much to modern Orthodoxy chagrin. There'll still be a need for yeshivas. I'm just joking. There'll still be a need for yeshivas even when Mashiach comes. And then I'll share with you 2 final anecdotes. And with this one, I'm doing that classic rabbi thing where you're saying you're overtime in your sermon and saying, I'll conclude with this. 15 minutes later, it's still going, right? One final story. Okay. Who wants to be, remember, who's our laner for today? We haven't appointed anyone to lane tonight. By laning, I mean, there's an English source on page 6. Who would like to read? Who hasn't had a chance to read? Women can get aliyahs over here, by the way. This is an aliyah that women can read. So look how progressive we are over here. That's something. Oh, Eileen, you're up. Okay, wonderful. I'll try to pivot the phone over here so that way they can see. All right, you're on.
Loyalty, humility, and genius.
Yes, this is Rabbi Moshe David Teller Zatzal's from the end of his tribute to Rav Moshe Feinstein in English.
As already stated, Rav Moshe was the most humble and modest of men. He never expected anyone else to acknowledge his greatness, but he never failed to acknowledge it himself. A few years before his passing, Rav Moshe had to have a pacemaker installed, and I was the one who explained to him the reasons for the procedure. During the day, while he was engaged in giving shiurim, writing teshuvos, or answering questions from all over the world, his blood pressure was perfectly normal. However, a 24-hour cardiac monitor revealed that at night, while asleep, his blood pressure became precipitously low. Only while engaged in studying and teaching Torah was it normal. In the past, he had often balked at going to the doctor for a general checkup, but had always been willing to see a physician when he felt something amiss. This time, however, and quite uncharacteristically, he was reluctant to go forward with the pacemaker. I asked him to explain his hesitancy, given that every doctor consulted agreed that the proposed pacemaker was essential. Several more days passed, and he still had not agreed to go for the procedure. I finally confronted him. Shever, this is not your way. You always make up your mind very quickly. Why is it taking you so long? Rav Moshe finally answered, I know how unworthy I am. I know how little Torah I know, but I am also aware that if they are to pick 71 people to make up a Sanhedrin, among the 71, they will most likely pick me. However, a Baal Mum, someone with a physical blemish, cannot be a member of the Sanhedrin. I am perturbed at the thought of doing something to myself that would make me unfit to join the Sanhedrin when Mashiach comes. I then reviewed the surgical procedure for him. I showed him some diagrams illustrating exactly what would be done. After listening carefully, he said, that is not considered a Baal Mum. Please make the appointment right away. We did so. Sadly, Mashiach did not come, a Sanhedrin was not convened, and Rav Moshe was not chosen to be a member. Hashem willing, Mashiach will be here very soon. We will inherit the building of the Beit HaMikdash and the establishment of the Sanhedrin.
Amen. Now, this is where my original shir ended. There was one last little footnote that I put. It's in the Hebrew at the end right over here. I preface by saying this is a very heavy point psychologically, but I think it's true. So after I put together the shir, this was it, and then I had to put in a little footnote over here because I was reading through Rav Ephraim Greenblatt Zatzal, one of the main primary students of Moshe Feinstein, author of the monumental Rivavos Ephraim. He has an introduction in which he has a tribute to Rav Moshe Feinstein there. So when I was doing my research, I was reading through eulogies and tributes to Rav Moshe to kind of cull different material. There's a throwaway line in there, which, something that bothered me about all this is, okay, Rav Moshe has this like really interesting and unique approach that he factors the coming of Mashiach imminently into the halachic process. But what I was scratching my head wondering the whole time was, why, obviously, okay, if halachically he read that Gemara, Menachos, or Sukkah, that could be it. That might be the explanation. But I think there was something deeper in his biography that actually may have been tugging at him, that maybe was, somehow subjectively, subconsciously leading him in that direction. Now, if I were to ask you, who were his sons, the sons of Moshe Feinstein? Does anyone know their names?
David.
Is there David Feinstein? Reuven Feinstein? There was one more. I didn't know this. They had a son, Pesach, who back in Russia predeceased them. And he writes over here in this is the last line. It's in the end note over here. Upedibros Moshe above Basra. And Ramoshe's commentary on the Talmud, I didn't find it inside, but he writes, Kasav al bno hakatan Pesach sheniftar. He writes about his son Pesach who passed away. Sheirenu bekarov, that he'll see him soon. ki hemen shemashiach miyad yavo, because he believed that Mashiach one day would come very soon. And so I think, and I saw reports actually, his son-in-law also, or Shiskal, also predeceased him as well, tragically. So Moshe was not an emotional man, but it's reported that a Yiskar, during the time of Yiskar alone, he would be crying for both of those, both his son and both his son-in-law who predeceased him at that time. But the language over here, Sheyirenu bekarov ki hemen shemashiach miyad yavo, he was holding out on Mashiach coming imminently to be reunited with his son. And I think to me, like, I think when I saw that, that kind of just blew open the entire topic. It made me go back to each and every one of these sources, and I read them completely differently from that point. I think for Moshe, the believing Mashiach coming wasn't just something that he believed in because halachically it made sense to him or theologically it made sense, but it was almost like this psychological necessity that he had. And unfortunately, Mashiach did not come during his lifetime, but I think it could help me appreciate kind of what led him to make all these psakim. Again, far be for me to say every single psak now is based on this one experience, but I wouldn't underestimate perhaps how much that may have been playing into his psychology when he was coming to that. I wish I had a happier note to end on that, but that's Amir Hashem Mashiach should come. But we'll conclude with that. All right, thank you everyone, and I keep saying this, but I'll try to be better about the 8 o'clock end time going forward.
Nice story, I heard.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Talking about their housework assignment.
Take care, Joe, George, Oliver.